Hey guys, tonight we journey into the surprisingly delightful world of medieval employment. Yes, employment. That thing you do every day, just with a lot more mud, fewer health benefits, and a high chance your boss is wearing a crown and has the legal right to execute you. But don't worry. Tonight we're skipping the manure-stained ploughman and heading straight for the top-shelf careers. The kind of jobs that came with perks like silk-lined cloaks, roasted meat, and the occasional brush with royalty. Though spoiler alert, you still probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up not to a rooster, but to the shrill screech of a falcon demanding breakfast. And not just any falcon. This one belongs to the king. You are a royal falconer. Not quite a knight. Not exactly a servant. You live in the strange, privileged in-between where birds of prey are your co-workers and royal favour is your performance review. The falcon before you blinks its enormous yellow eyes and ruffles its feathers. You've named it Isolde, though officially it's His Majesty's Northern Gerfalcon. You've raised her from chickhood, trained her to hunt on command and endured more than your fair share of talon-related injuries along the way. Being a falconer means you're respected, but cautiously. The birds you train are worth more than most peasants earn in a lifetime. If Isolde flies away mid-hunt, that's your head on the chopping block. Literally. You slip on your glove, a thick piece of padded leather already scarred with scratches, and hold out your arm. Isolde hops on, light for her size, but still heavy enough to remind you you're not in charge. Not really. You feed her a small piece of rabbit from your pouch. She swallows it in one gulp, then fluffs her wings like she owns the air. She kind of does. Your job today is to accompany the king and his retinue on a falconry expedition. You ride behind the royal party, holding the hooded birds as they jostle in their perches. It's a parade of feathered nobility, peregrines, merlins, goshawks, each one with a name, a diet, and a mood. Some of them hate each other. One of them hates you. Historians still argue whether falconry was purely sport or a subtle symbol of control, man's mastery over nature, or nature's reluctant cooperation. Either way, it's majestic, and very, very muddy. You guide the king's horse toward a meadow. The hunting dogs are already ranging ahead. The falcons tremble slightly, sensing prey. You unhood Isolde, her eyes sharpen, you launch her. She explodes into the air like an arrow loosed from a bow. The other falconers follow suit and the sky suddenly blooms with wings and whistles. You track her through the clouds as she circles high above the field, then stoops, a perfect dive. A rabbit bolts from the hedgerow and Isolde hits it with the precision of a falling dagger. The king laughs. You exhale. Later, in the tented pavilion, you sit on a low stool polishing jesses, the leather straps used to tether your birds. You tend to their talons, clean their beaks, and whisper soothing nonsense to calm their nerves. It's quiet work, gentle, careful. You recall when you first started, just an apprentice with pecked fingers and a lot to learn. Your master used to say, treat your falcon like your future spouse. Firm hand, soft voice, and never turn your back. The hours pass. You eat your lunch with one hand, bread and cheese mostly, and keep the other free to grab a wayward bird should someone's merlin decide it's had enough aristocracy for one day. That evening, the king claps you on the shoulder, says nothing, just nods. It's the highest compliment you'll ever receive. You sleep in the falconry quarters, curled near the hearth. The birds rest on their perches, feathers puffed, heads tucked under wings. You close your eyes and dream not of gold or glory, but of wings in flight and skies unbroken. Because in medieval Europe, the best job doesn't always belong to the man with the sword. Sometimes it's the one holding the bird. You rise before the bells. The morning is dim, quiet and thick with the smell of damp stone and brewing grain. You stretch your back, rub the sleep from your eyes and head toward your favourite place in the entire monastery, the brewery. Because you, lucky soul, are the monastery brewer, not just a man of faith, not just a humble servant of God, but also the one responsible for one of the most sacred and celebrated duties in the entire abbey, making beer. And not just any beer, holy beer. You step into the brewhouse and inhale deeply. Malted barley, yeast, smoke, and a faint whiff of yesterday's spilled work greet you like old friends. The fire has already been lit beneath the copper kettle, its glow flickering across the walls. The monks will be up soon for prayers, but the brew waits for no one. You start by checking the grains, carefully malted, dried and stored in thick sacks. You pour them into a giant wooden vat and begin the mash, stirring the grains into hot water with a paddle longer than your arm. The slurry thickens, steaming as it releases the sugars that will eventually become alcohol and comfort. And maybe, depending on how strong the batch is, mild theological revelations. Beer isn't just indulgence, it's survival. In a world where water can kill you faster than plague, beer is the safe choice, mild enough for children, strong enough to calm anxious monks, and always, always served with meals. Historians still argue whether the monks genuinely preferred it for health, or just enjoyed a good buzz after Vespers. As the mash rests, you climb to the cooling room. Here, the boiled liquid, now sweet and rich, will rest before fermentation. You pause to look out the tiny window slit, just in time to see the mist curling over the monastery fields. For a moment it's peaceful. You forget your blistered hands and backache. You're alone, in the quiet, with the sacred steam of future ale rising around you. Your brewmaster's notes are etched on parchment, stained with time and the occasional yeast smudge. You follow them precisely, though you've added your own touches over the years. A pinch of sage in winter, a touch of honey near Easter. One time, you tried lavender. The abbot was confused, but the brothers kept asking for seconds. You head back down to check the fire. Still hot, still steady. You feed it another log and watch the flames curl under the kettle. The wort will boil soon. You hum a hymn, soft and off-key, and ladle a sample. It's rich. Malty. Maybe a touch too thick. You adjust the water ratio and stir again. Being a monk brewer isn't glamorous, but it has perks. You're respected, trusted. The abbey's ale is traded with nearby towns, offered to travellers and gifted to visiting lords. People know your work even if they don't know your name. You remember the bishop's visit last summer. He asked for your strongest batch. After 3 cups, he blessed the chicken coop twice and fell asleep in the garden. The chickens were never more spiritually secure. You clean as you go, scrubbing the wooden tubs with bitter herbs to ward off mould. You're not sure it works, but it smells nice, and the other monks claim it keeps the beer from catching demons. You don't correct them. You just smile and nod. Later, as the sun rises, the abbey comes alive. Chants echo down the halls, the kitchen clangs, the scriptorium buzzes with scratching quills. But in the brewhouse, there is stillness, focus. Your work is slow, intentional, rhythmic. You pour the wort into the fermenting cask, pitch the yeast, and seal the lid. Now it must rest. Like the brethren after matins, it needs darkness, silence, and time. You label the barrel, batch 143, winter ale, strong, smooth, possibly divine. You step back, wiping your hands on your apron. A younger monk enters quietly, eyes wide. You show him how to check the mash temperature, how to stir without splashing, how to keep the fire from choking the kettle. He nods solemnly. He'll take over someday. You walk outside, steam rising behind you like incense. The abbey bells toll. Breakfast waits. Bread, cheese, and a modest cup of your own handiwork. You sip it slowly, smiling. Because in medieval Europe, holiness might dwell in the cathedral, but heaven brews in the cellar. You're out the door before the town stirs, striding through narrow cobbled streets with a bell in one hand and a voice that could wake the dead. Good thing too, because it's your job to do just that. You're the town crier, not just a walking news bulletin, but the living pulse of the village square, the royal messenger with mud on your boots and lungs strong enough to carry a decree through fog, market chaos, and general peasant disinterest. You swing the bell with practised flair, clang, 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 and bellow, "Hear ye, hear ye." A few people grumble from under cloaks. A baker pokes his head out, scowling. A dog barks, possibly in agreement. This morning's proclamation is a real treat. A new tax on cider barrels, decreed by the Lord and stamped with the royal seal. You unfold the parchment carefully, it's damp and smells faintly of turnip, and read aloud with the solemn tone of someone who knows full well everyone's going to hate this. Clang, clang. Henceforth, by the grace of His Majesty, all cider sold or traded shall be levied at 1 penny per cask, to be paid forthwith at the gatehouse. A tomato hits the doorframe beside you. Close, but not personal. Yet. Being a town crier means more than shouting at strangers. You're part herald, part court jester, part punching bag. You're the first to announce royal births, tragic deaths, market changes, suspicious outbreaks of plague, and the rules for the next maypole dance, sometimes in the same breath. Historians still argue whether criers were government tools or village celebrities. You lean into the celebrity angle. It makes the sneers easier to ignore. You move from the market to the well square, reciting the message again, then again by the chapel. The goal is full coverage, like medieval Wi-Fi but much louder and slightly wetter. After your rounds, you return to your little office, a glorified storage room behind the guild hall, where you dry your cloak, file away the parchment and jot notes in your own crude shorthand about which areas booed the loudest. You'll include that in your report. Maybe next time they'll send someone with fewer tomato-shaped welts. You've been doing this job for years. You remember the first time you rang the bell, it felt too heavy. Your voice cracked. An old man laughed and called you the shouting twig. Now, people listen, or at least stop throwing things long enough to hear you finish. There's a rhythm to it. Announcements at dawn, updates before dusk, special decrees when plague hits, or when the mill floods, or when someone finds a potato that looks like a saint. You once had to announce a missing goat. The goat, it turned out, was inside the chapel chewing on hymn books. Your voice echoed through stone and straw alike. One shaggy sinner apprehended. The job has dangers. Once you delivered a royal fine to the tavern. The patrons chased you 3 streets and threw a chamber pot from a window. You ducked. The steward behind you did not. He still limps. But there are moments of joy, declaring weddings, victories, new holidays. You remember the crowd roaring when you read aloud the edict forgiving debts after a harsh winter. People wept. They lifted you onto their shoulders. You dropped your bell and someone caught it mid-air. For once you felt like a hero. Your uniform, such as it is a bright tunic with the town's crest, a belt with a pouch for scrolls, and your ever-faithful bell. You polish it every Sunday. Its clang is your signature, your punctuation, your weapon. By afternoon your voice is scratchy, but you've memorised every alley's echo and every stall's acoustics. You modulate your bellow like a troubadour of bureaucracy. You end the day on the east side near the old wall. Fewer listeners here, but protocol is protocol. You ring once, then cry, "Hear ye! Let it be known that Lord Edward of Halberton seeks a wife, preferably with dowry, teeth, and tolerance for gout." That one always gets laughs. Back home, you hang your bell on a hook, sip some weak ale, and rest your voice. Your throat will heal overnight. Hopefully. Because tomorrow, someone somewhere will pass a new law, lose a cow, or declare war. And when they do, you will be the first to tell everyone, loudly. Because in medieval Europe, the only thing faster than gossip is the guy hired to yell it. You wake to the steady sound of rushing water. Not a stream, not a river exactly, but something louder, closer, more powerful. You stretch, wipe the grit from your eyes and step outside into the damp dawn mist, your hands already rough with the promise of a long day. Because you, my friend, are the miller, master of grain, of keeper of flour, lord of the local economy, assuming no one notices how much you accidentally skim off the top. The mill stands at the edge of the village, tucked beside the river like a sleeping beast. Its great wheel churns endlessly, wooden blades dipping and rising, creaking with purpose. Water flows down the chute, spinning the axle, turning the grindstones, massive slabs of quarried stone that hum and groan with every rotation. It's a song only millers know, damp, gritty, and hypnotic. You duck under the low doorway, into a room filled with dust so fine it coats your eyebrows. Flour hangs in the air like fog, getting into your lungs, your clothes, and every crevice of your life. You've long since stopped noticing the taste of it in your mouth. Already, a line has formed outside. Farmers with sacks slung over shoulders, waiting for their grain to be milled. Wheat, rye, barley, it all ends up here. You keep a tally, scratching names and weights on a wax tablet. Some pay in coin, most in grain. Some leave behind a small gift, a few eggs, a wedge of cheese, a quiet warning about an angry badger near the bridge. You hoist a sack onto your shoulder and dump it into the hopper, a wooden funnel that feeds the grain between the grindstones. You adjust the spacing carefully. Too wide, and the flour is coarse. Too tight, and the stones overheat. The sweet spot is a whisper-thin gap where flour pours out like powdery silk. Historians still argue whether millers were truly villains or just misunderstood. You prefer the second. Sure, some millers took an extra scoop or two from every customer, but it's not stealing. It's tradition. And besides, running a mill is dangerous, thankless work. One slip and your hand could vanish beneath the grinding wheel. You once saw a careless apprentice lose 3 fingers. He went on to become a fairly competent shepherd. Safer job, dumber sheep. Inside the mill, the dust gets everywhere. Fires are a constant threat. One stray spark and the whole place goes up like a bakery from hell. That's why you ban candles. That's also why you keep a bucket of water by the door, which your cousin once mistook for soup. He didn't get invited back, but despite the risks, being a miller comes with clout. People need you. Grain feeds the village, and without your flour, there's no bread, no porridge, no pies, no peace. That gives you leverage. When you say the wheel needs repairs, the village listens. When you want a new roof, people chip in, grudgingly. And then there's the gossip. Oh, the gossip. Farmers chat while waiting. Merchants mumble about prices. Children brag about stolen apples. You hear it all. You don't spread it publicly, but you know. Who's cheating whom? Who's hiding a pig? Who drinks too much? Who doesn't drink enough? Your wife always says you should write a book. You say you'd need a monastery's worth of parchment. Midday comes. The stones grow warm. You pour water over them to cool the grind. You stretch your arms, cracked and floured, and eat lunch on the steps. Bread, a bit of salted fish, and ale from the monastery. You watch the wheel turn. Always turning. It matches your heartbeat. Back to work. Another sack. Another measure. You trade a scoop for a story, a wink, or sometimes a song. A young woman hums as you measure her grain. A man tells a joke that nearly makes you choke on flour. It's a good day. Evening approaches. You sweep the floor, rake the spent husks, and grease the axle. You close the sluice to slow the wheel, just a little. You listen as the churn fades to a gentle splash. Peaceful now. You stand outside and stretch your sore shoulders, watching the river run past in silver streaks. A frog croaks nearby. A dragonfly zips across the surface. The scent of damp wood and grain hangs in the air. You dust the flour from your tunic, pat the wheel affectionately, and smile. Because in medieval Europe, power doesn't always come from swords or scrolls. Sometimes it flows through water, stone, and the hands that feed a village. You sit hunched over your workbench by candlelight, the tip of your quill hovering just above the parchment. Your fingers are stained with ink, your back already aching, and you've only just begun today's task. You sigh, quietly, reverently, and begin to write. Because you are a scribe, not a poet, not a novelist. You're a copier of knowledge, a hand for hire in the slow, painstaking business of reproduction. And in a world where books are worth more than sheep, your job is a sacred kind of power, just a very slow one. The abbey is quiet this morning, save for the scratch of quills and the occasional sneeze echoing down the stone corridor. The scriptorium is your domain. Long wooden tables, pots of ink, sand trays for blotting, and stacks of vellum prepared from calfskin. Soft, smooth, terrifyingly expensive. You work by daylight whenever possible, but today the clouds hang thick and grey, so candles flicker on every surface. You light yours, shielding the flame with a cupped hand, and carefully dip your quill. One wrong flick and you could blot an entire page. 2 hours of work gone just like that. You write slowly, precisely. Latin script, fine uncials, perfectly spaced. Each letter must look like the one before it. Or worse, like the letter in the book you're copying. Some of these texts are sacred, others are practical. Today it's a legal document. Land disputes between 2 minor nobles. It's boring, but at least it's legible. Last week you copied a scroll so crammed with abbreviations it looked like someone sneezed alphabet soup onto the page. As you work, you think. Scribes don't just write. They read, absorb, remember. You've memorised quotes from St. Augustine, snippets of Galen's medical theories, and a surprising amount of bad medieval poetry. You've seen things most people never will. Maps of strange lands, illuminated psalters, secret love letters sealed with wax and accidentally reopened with steam. Historians still argue whether scribes influenced history or simply preserved it. You suspect both. Because when you copy a royal decree, it becomes law. When you transcribe a monk's vision of heaven, it becomes someone's truth. And when you record gossip, well, let's just say there's a reason some parchments end up mysteriously smudged. You're not just any scribe either. You've been entrusted with more than texts. You've been asked to forge a noble's signature once. Just once. And you did it so well, even he wasn't sure if he'd written it. That sort of trust is dangerous, but flattering. Your eyes start to blur. You blink hard and stretch. The apprentice across from you is napping, quill still in hand. You toss a crumb at him. He startles, then returns to scribbling nonsense on the back of a draft. You'll check it later. Probably erase half of it. Again. Your tools are few but vital. A goose feather quill trimmed to a fine nib, oak gall ink mixed with iron salts, a pumice stone to smooth the parchment, and a small knife for scraping mistakes. Because yes, you will make mistakes. Everyone does. But the trick is making them disappear before the abbot notices. Your favourite moments are the marginalia. Tiny doodles tucked into the corners, a rabbit jousting with a snail, a monk wrestling a demon shaped like a turnip. Sometimes you even slip in your own likeness, hunched over a page, eyes wide, surrounded by cats. It's your secret rebellion. Lunch is bread and broth, eaten in silence. Then back to work. You switch from Latin to Old French. The letters change, the rhythm shifts, but your pace never falters. Each line is a meditation, each paragraph a pilgrimage. The bell tolls for vespers. You set down your quill, blow gently on the last line and sprinkle sand to dry the ink. You stretch, crack your knuckles and roll your shoulders. Another page complete, another voice captured, another thread in the vast whispering web of human thought. You walk the dim hallways back to your cell, passing shelves of books you helped bring into being. Their spines gleam in the candlelight, some gilded, others plain, all precious. You lie down on your straw mattress, fingertips still black with ink. Outside, the wind murmurs through the stone arches. Inside, your mind spins with verses, lines, and the fading echo of scratch, scratch, scratch. Because in medieval Europe, the most powerful man in the room might be the one writing quietly in the corner. The forge is already hot when you arrive, and not the cosy kind of hot. It's the kind that wraps around you like a damp wool cloak, sticky and relentless. Your face is flushed, your tunic clings to your back, and your breath tastes faintly of soot. Because today, you're a glassblower. And unlike the smith or the baker, whose fires are functional, yours are a little more magical. You don't make weapons or bread, you make beauty. And maybe the occasional wine bottle or weirdly decorative chicken, depending on who's placing orders this week. You step into the workshop and glance at the furnace, a squat, smouldering beast built of clay and brick glowing from within. The crucibles inside are already melting chunks of sand, lime and soda ash into liquid glass, smooth as honey and just as dangerous. You grab your blowpipe, a long hollow rod, and begin to warm it. The trick is patience. Everything in glasswork is about timing. Too fast and the glass collapses, too slow and it turns brittle. Somewhere in between it dances. You gather a glob of molten glass onto the end of your pipe, turning it slowly in the fire until it glows like sunrise. Then you pull it free, rotating constantly, and bring it to your lips, and blow, not hard, not fast, just enough to tease a bubble into life. A glistening orb begins to form, spinning and stretching with every rotation of the rod. You swing it slightly downward. Gravity helps, and pray it doesn't wobble. Your apprentice watches in awe. Last week he tried and ended up with a melted pancake that vaguely resembled a frog. It sold anyway. People like frogs. Historians still argue whether medieval glassblowers were artists or artisans, decorators or chemists. You say both. Because you've memorized the dance of heat, pressure and breath. You've created goblets with spiraled stems, windows that throw rainbows across church pews, and once, a request from a minor noble, a glass chamber pot. It shattered impressively. As the orb expands, you use shears to trim its edges, paddles to shape its sides. You reheat it constantly, dipping it back into the furnace to keep it malleable. The heat hums in your ears. Your heartbeat matches the rhythm of the turning pipe. You are part machine, part magician. The workshop smells like smoke, ash, and a faint hint of warm sugar. Molten glass always smells sweeter than it should. The air is so dry your lips crack. You sip water, carefully. You can't afford shaky hands. You remember your first masterpiece. A tiny blue vase, no taller than your thumb, perfect in every curve, you still have it. It lives wrapped in linen beneath your bed. Every now and then, you take it out, hold it to the light, and feel like a god. Today's commission is for the abbot, a new set of window panes. They need to be flat, clear, and perfectly round at the centre. You hate flat glass. It's unforgiving. But you begin humming softly, blow, roll, heat, snip, reheat, whisper something under your breath, half prayer, half swear. The apprentice brings you more sand. He asks if adding crushed emerald really makes the green deeper. You nod. He asks if the stories are true, that some ancient glassmakers use powdered bones. You shrug. You've heard stranger. Your back aches by noon, your hands throb, but the glass sings. Each piece you make catches the light in a new way, reflects the fire differently. You never make the same thing twice, even when you try. After shaping, you place the finished piece in the annealing oven to cool slowly. Too fast and it cracks. Like people, really. They need time to adjust, or they shatter. You step outside for air. The cool wind bites your skin, already scorched from hours beside the flame. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The world sees your work in windows and goblets, but they don't see you. That's fine. You prefer it. You live in the space between art and utility, between fire and form. Back inside, your apprentice is trying again. His bubble pops. He curses. You smile. Because in medieval Europe, the best jobs don't always wear armour or crowns. Sometimes they wear soot and leave beauty in their wake. The smell hits you first. Not awful, at least not today, but sharp and earthy, like crushed herbs left too long in the sun. You push open the crooked wooden door to your apothecary shop and are greeted by a wall of scents: rosemary, mint, dried lavender, vinegar, and something that might be dead mouse but hopefully isn't. Because you're an apothecary, not quite a doctor, not just a herbalist. You're a concoctor of remedies, a mixer of cures, and depending on the hour, a spiritual advisor, minor wizard, or someone's last desperate hope. You don't promise miracles, but sometimes your tinctures do feel miraculous, especially if you're the one who brewed them. You light a small lamp and begin your routine. Shelves line the walls, crammed with jars, bowls, and flasks labelled in Latin, Greek, and your own creative shorthand. Some contain roots and powders, others have weirder things. Frog legs, dried leeches, a feather that belonged to a magpie who allegedly once stole a bishop's ring. You begin grinding dried horehound into a powder. Good for coughs, allegedly. You'll mix it with honey and mouldy bread. Yes, mouldy. Mould, in small doses, can help. Probably. Historians still argue whether apothecaries were early scientists or well-dressed poisoners. You suppose you've been both, depending on the client. A woman arrives before the sun's fully up. She needs something for her husband's back pain. You hand her a salve made from poppy, vinegar, and mustard seed. It smells like a spiced pickle, but it works. She offers you 3 eggs and a threadbare coin. You take the eggs. Then a child comes limping. Scraped leg. You wash the wound with wine. Ouch. And wrap it in cloth steeped in comfrey. The kid doesn't cry. Much. Later, a local merchant sends a servant for something to enhance energy. You pull a dusty jar from the back labelled powder of the horned goat. You're not sure what's in it anymore, but it smells spicy and makes people feel invincible for about an hour. The merchant will be thrilled. Your recipes come from everywhere. Ancient Roman texts, scraps of Arabic scrolls, old women in the forest, and your own experiments. You once tried mixing foxglove with red wine. The patient claimed to see angels. Then he danced into a fence and broke his nose. Your mortar and pestle are your best friends. You grind, measure, pour, taste, carefully, and sniff, cautiously. You label everything meticulously, except the things that are probably illegal. Those just have smiley faces. You joke, but seriously. Don't ever mix belladonna with wormwood unless you really don't like someone. Lunch is a few bites of hard cheese and a dried fig. You nibble while boiling elderberries down to syrup. Elderberry makes people feel cared for, even if it doesn't actually do anything. The placebo effect is your most trusted assistant. You spend the afternoon restocking. You dry nettle leaves on racks, slice licorice root, and crumble dried rose petals into sachets. You refill the rat poison jar and double-check the ingredients. Not because you'll use it today, but because someone always comes asking eventually. Sometimes they whisper, "Do you have anything for unwanted pregnancies?" Or, My neighbour's chicken keeps wandering into my yard. Or even, if someone were to drink something unpleasant, what would help them forget it? You never answer directly, just raise an eyebrow and offer them valerian root for sleep, and maybe something bitter, for guilt. The apprentice returns from the field with sacks of herbs. He's labelled them all wrong again. You sigh and start sorting. He'll learn, or you'll poison him. Accidentally, of course. As the sun sets, you clean your workbench, snuff the lamp, and tuck away the more dangerous powders in your locked cabinet. You tie a ribbon around a bottle of rosewater. Someone ordered it for a wedding gift. You check the dried toad just once. Still there, still staring. You don't remember why you needed it, but it feels important. You step outside into the cooling evening. The village buzzes faintly. Someone's singing. A baby cries. A cart rumbles past. And in the fading light, you smile. Because in medieval Europe, when the doctor bleeds you and the priest scolds you, it's the apothecary who might just save your life. The room is already crowded when you arrive, not with nobles or knights, but with tension. You duck behind a pillar, take a deep breath, and adjust your hat. A fool's cap, complete with bells that jingle when you move. You hate the bells, but you love the stage, because tonight you're the castle jester, not just a clown, not merely comic relief. You're the pressure valve in a world where one wrong look can mean a duel, and one bad harvest can unravel a kingdom. Your job is laughter, yes, but it's also survival. For you, and sometimes for everyone else. You enter with a tumble. A roll, a pop to your feet, and a joke that makes the wine-sipping courtiers snort unexpectedly. Good. They're already leaning in. You grab a prop, a chicken puppet, and launch into a monologue about a bishop, a barrel, and a very confused donkey. Even the Duke cracks a grin. Gesturing is an art. Timing, tone, improvisation. You read the room constantly. Who's drunk, who's angry, who's too quiet. You know which noble lost a bet last night, which one's been making eyes at the chambermaid, and which one has gout in places he refuses to name, and you use it all. Historians still argue whether jesters were simple entertainers or subtle political players. You know the answer, both. Because no one else in this castle can call the king his grumpiness and walk away still breathing. You spin a tale about a man who tried to outsmart a witch and ended up married to a goat. The crowd laughs, even the steward, even the usually grim captain of the guard. And then, just for a moment, you add something real. A little sting hidden in the sugar, a comment about taxes or hunger or the mysterious disappearance of a rival courtier. The room stiffens, someone coughs, and then you juggle turnips. Tension diffused. It's not just comedy, it's diplomacy with bells on. You remember the day you were hired. You'd performed outside the castle gates with a troupe. Your impression of the sheriff was so spot on he had you arrested. The Duke, fortunately, had a sense of humour. He released you and offered you a job. You've learned to be everything they need. A fool, a mimic, a singer, a dancer, a magician, a distraction. You've danced in front of royalty and farted on command for bored princesses. You once recited a love poem so touching it made a knight cry into his mead. But you also remember the danger. The jester before you told a joke about the Queen's plump ankles. He now jests for a much quieter audience. Underground, you know your limits. You test them, sure, but you never forget the line. Between performances, you lounge by the kitchen fire, stealing bits of roast goose and exchanging gossip with the cooks. You scribble jokes in the margins of parchment scraps, practice tongue twisters, and rehearse puppet routines. Your quarters are small but cosy. Padded walls, for practice tumbles, not madness, and a small mirror where you rehearse expressions. You keep a flask of cherry wine hidden beneath your pillow and a book of riddles by your bed. You once made the king laugh so hard he spilled wine on his robes. He gave you a silver ring for that. You wear it on a chain around your neck. It clinks when you leap. Night deepens. The feast winds down. You're called for one last performance. A parody song about the royal hunting party, sung in a voice that's suspiciously like the king's. You cross your eyes at just the right moment. The hall erupts. As you bow, the queen catches your eye. She's not smiling, but she's not scowling either. Progress. You return to your chamber, strip off the bells and lie back. Your legs ache. Your voice is hoarse, but your mind buzzes with lines, gestures, rhythms. Because in medieval Europe, survival isn't always about swordplay or scripture. Sometimes it's about knowing when to make them laugh and when to make them think. You wake to the distant clang of hooves on stone, a rhythm you know by heart. They're back, the knights. You throw on your apron, wipe the soot from your hands even though you haven't touched the forge yet, and hurry to the courtyard, because you, good citizen, are the castle armourer. You're not a knight, but their lives rest in your hands. Well, your hammers, and your tongs, and that giant barrel of oil you use to keep their chainmail from turning into rusty spaghetti. The knights dismount, creaking in steel. They smell like dust, blood, and overconfidence. One tosses his dented breastplate into your arms with a grunt that says, "Fix this." You resist the urge to say, "With what your attitude?" and nod instead. Time to get to work. You haul the armour back to your shop, a stone-walled furnace room that smells of scorched iron, wet leather, and 1,000 bad decisions. Inside, your tools gleam in the firelight: hammers, awls, rivet punches, and your pride. 3 perfectly balanced anvils, each named after an ex you'd rather not talk about. Your first task is patching a crack in a cuirass. You heat the metal until it glows red, then hammer it flat, sparks flying like angry fireflies. The sound echoes off the walls, a constant metallic heartbeat. You're sweating before the first rivet is redone, but it's the good kind of sweat, the kind that smells like purpose and doesn't involve running from angry pigs. You remember the first suit of armour you ever made. It weighed more than the knight who wore it. He fell into a pond and had to be fished out by 5 men and a mule. You've improved since then. Historians still argue whether medieval armourers were artists or engineers. You know the answer is yes. You measure, mould, temper, and craft. Every gauntlet must move like a second hand. Every helmet must protect without suffocating. You've learned the shape of human fear and how to shield it. A squire arrives with another urgent request, a mail hauberk torn at the shoulder. You groan. Chainmail is a nightmare. Thousands of interlocking rings, all whispering you'll never find the broken one in unison. You sit down, grab your pliers and start the hunt. Hours pass. You fix dents, replace buckles, tighten straps. You re-sew padded gambesons, buff sword nicks out of greaves, and clean bloodstains out of everything. You do not ask what caused them. You don't want to know. Lunch is a hunk of bread, chewed while you stoke the forge. You dip a half-finished helmet into the quenching barrel and steam erupts like a dragon with indigestion. Your apprentice jumps. You chuckle. He's new and nervous. Still thinks hammers are for smashing. You show him how to peen a rivet without shattering the whole joint. He nods, grateful. He'll get there. Or lose a toe. Either way, education. There's pride in what you do. When a knight rides out in your armour, you watch the sun glint off their polished helm and think, yeah, I made that. When they come back alive, you think, yeah, I saved that. When they don't come back, well, you salvage what you can, melt it down, begin again. There's talk of war. There always is. More commissions, more urgency. You secretly enjoy the chaos. It means more work, more coin, more chances to perfect that new articulated elbow piece you've been dreaming about. Yes, dreaming. You once had a nightmare about misaligned greaves. You woke up sweating and whispering wrong hinge pin. Evening settles in. You scrub your arms in the barrel, rub soot from your face and stretch your back. The workshop glows amber, warm and alive. The armour gleams on the racks, order from chaos, function from fire. You sit for a moment listening to the coals hiss. A knight stops by to thank you, a rare event. He says the new breastplate turned a blade this morning. You nod and pretend not to care, but inside, you're smiling. Because in medieval Europe, there are warriors with swords, and warriors with hammers. The rooster crows, but you've been awake for an hour already. Not from nerves. You don't get nervous anymore. You're too practiced, too precise. You finish your morning prayer, kiss the ring on your finger, and step into the light. Because you are the executioner. Yes, that executioner. Feared, gossiped about, sometimes blessed, sometimes cursed. You're the one they whisper about in the tavern, but watch openly in the square. And while it may not be a job you'd write a poem about in the strange calculus of medieval society, you're as vital as the baker. Just slightly less popular. Your tools are already waiting. A block, an axe, a few lengths of rope, and a small leather kit containing various blades, clamps, and, hopefully not needed today, a saw. Everything is spotless. You pride yourself on that. Blood may be your medium, but mess is unprofessional. You're not just a brute with a blade, you're a ritual, a reminder, a final punctuation mark in the story of someone who broke the rules. Your role is public, yes, but it's also sacred. Even the priest doesn't question your place. You're necessary. Ugly, maybe, but necessary. Historians still argue whether executioners were respected figures or social pariahs. You know the truth leans uncomfortably between both. People avert their eyes when they pass you in the market, but they make sure to offer you the best produce. No one wants the guy with the axe to be hangry. Today's job is simple. 1 thief, 1 nobleman, 2 crimes. Different methods. The thief will swing, the nobleman will kneel. Status doesn't buy innocence, but it does buy options. You begin with the gallows, inspect the rope. Good tension. You tested it earlier with a sack of sand and a pair of geese who now hate you. You mutter a quick blessing, not for yourself, but for the condemned. It's part of the ritual. Your mother taught you that. She was an executioner too. The thief arrives in chains. Young, barely a man. He stole food for his siblings. You don't get to choose who lives or dies. You're not the judge. You're the final hand, not the pointing finger. You do your job, efficiently, kindly, if that word fits. You speak to him quietly, walk him through it. Offer a cloth if he wants it over his eyes. He refuses. Brave or angry. Sometimes it's hard to tell. You nod once, place the rope and step back. It's over in seconds. The square, filled with murmuring townsfolk, is suddenly hushed. No applause, no cheers, just silence, the kind that clings to skin. You leave the body for the constable. Your work is done there. Now, the noble. He's older, accused of treason. Got caught sending letters to the enemy, sealed with his signet ring no less. Amateur mistake. He's allowed a private beheading in the courtyard behind the keep. You prefer this. Quieter. No crowd. Just you, the noble, and the priest, who looks like he'd rather be absolutely anywhere else. You kneel beside your axe. You've sharpened it 3 times this morning. Polish the blade until it gleams. A dull blade is cruelty. A sharp one is mercy. The noble kneels, murmurs something that might be a prayer. You give him a moment, then 2, then raise the axe. Clean. 1 stroke. You always aim for 1. You clean the blade carefully, wrapping it in oiled cloth. Return it to its box. The sun is starting to dip. Long shadows across the grass. Back in your quarters, you hang your cloak. Wash your hands. Scrub the creases of your nails. Some days you smell like iron until dawn. You eat a quiet dinner, bread, onion soup, a pear, soft and sweet. Your apprentice asks if you ever get used to it. You pause, then say, no, and that's the point. Because in medieval Europe, justice needs a face. And sometimes it's the face everyone's too afraid to look at. The sun's barely crested the trees, and already the dew clings to your boots as you walk through rows of gently nodding heads. Green, golden, and thick with promise. You inhale the earthy scent of damp soil and fresh herbs and allow yourself a quiet moment. Because today you're a medieval gardener, not the fancy type who trims roses for queens. No, you tend a monastic garden, where food is medicine and every root might hold a cure, or at least a very bitter tea. You pass the beehives on your left, buzzing like tiny apocalyptic choirs. The bees don't bother you. You've learned to move slowly, confidently. They know you, they trust you. Unlike the cook who still insists you're hiding hallucinogenic mushrooms in the stew herbs. You kneel at the first bed, leeks, onions and garlic. The holy trinity of please don't die from your wound. You loosen the soil with your fingers, feel for rot, pluck a few weeds. It's meditative work, rhythmic, satisfying. Your garden is both orderly and wild. Rows of vegetables, sure, but also creeping vines of comfrey, flowering valerian, beds of yarrow, tansy, and mint. Every plant has a purpose, even if that purpose is just to keep bugs off the carrots. Historians still argue whether medieval gardeners were true herbalists or glorified labourers. You believe the real ones were both. You mix manure with the same care as you mix chamomile salve. You study the moon phases, the frost patterns, the moods of your parsley. Yes, it has moods. Your tools are simple. A curved knife, a short-handled rake, a spade worn smooth by years of use, and your hands. Always your hands. Calloused, dirt-stained, often bleeding, but strong, knowledgeable. You once cured a monk's cough with boiled thyme and honey. He wept. Probably because he thought he was dying. But still, it worked. After morning prayers, Brother Ulrich joins you to gather herbs for the infirmary. He's a terrible gardener, stomps everywhere, plucks flowers without asking. You gently redirect him like a shepherd with an especially clumsy sheep. You teach the apprentices to identify plant families by scent. You test them. Which one smells like a sweaty goat and might cure fever? If they guess fever few, they pass. If they guess actual goat, they get a week of muck duty. By mid-morning, the kitchen boy arrives begging for more dill. You give him sage instead. The cook won't notice. Sage makes everything taste like someone tried. You eat lunch beside the bee wall, bread, soft cheese and a handful of strawberries that never quite made it to the abbot's table. You watch a snail attempt to cross a leaf and decide not to stop it. Let it dream. In the afternoon, you harvest nettle, careful to wear gloves this time. Last week's sting still itches. You dry the leaves in the sun, turning them gently, humming under your breath. You label each bunch with a wax tag and string it in the storage hut, alongside bundles of lavender and chamomile. The place smells like an enchanted nap. Occasionally villagers visit asking for cures. You provide salves, teas, and the occasional folk remedy involving apples, whispered prayers, and a sock under the mattress. They always thank you with things: eggs, bread, gossip. Once, a chicken. You named it Parsnip. It hates you. Evening comes with golden light slanting through the hedgerows. You water the thirsty roots, whisper to the cucumbers, and chase a hedgehog out of the lettuce. Again, you pause to admire your work, not as a farmer admires his field, but as a painter admires a canvas. Every leaf placed, every bed alive. You touch the soil and feel it breathe back at you. Because in medieval Europe, healing doesn't always come from prayers or potions. Sometimes it grows quietly beneath your fingers. You stretch your arms high, crack your neck side to side, and yawn so wide you nearly swallow the morning. A wooden tray rests beside you. Clay pots, mixing bowls, and one stubborn lump of dough that stares back with silent judgment. You squint at it. Because you are the town's baker, and you've been up since before dawn, kneading, mixing, cursing quietly, and shaping loaves for people who'll never stop to think about the miracle they're about to eat. Bread. Crusty, warm, life-giving bread. The kind that holds this whole crumbly world together. The bakery is small. Just a stone oven built into the back wall, soot-streaked and perpetually warm. The hearth flickers with the red coals, and every surface is dusted with flour so thick it's practically snowing indoors. There's a family of mice living behind the grain sacks. You've made peace. Sort of. You lean over the mixing table and punch down the dough. Hard. Therapeutic. Today it's barley and rye, laced with a little caraway. You hum as you fold and press. Fold and press. Your hands know this rhythm like monks know prayers. Historians still argue whether medieval bakers were trusted artisans or habitual cheats. After all, you control food. Real power. And yes, you may have once mixed sawdust into the dough during a grain shortage, but gently and with love. Your sourdough starter lives in a clay jar passed down from your grandmother. It bubbles ominously. You feed it scraps of flour and whisper compliments so it doesn't turn sour. More sour. You've seen starters go bad out of spite. First batch is ready. You shape loaves by feel, patting the rounded forms with hands that never quite lose the scent of yeast. You load them into the oven with a long-handled peel, the backs of your arms singed from 100 close calls. The heat whooshes out, kissing your face with dry fire. While the loaves bake, you prep the next batch. Oat cakes. For old Gertrude, who swears they cure her joint pain. She says if you ever stop making them, she'll curse your chickens. You don't even own chickens, but you're not taking chances. The shop bell jingles. Your apprentice. Finally. He tracks flour from the street, yawns dramatically, and nearly knocks over a tray of buns. You glare. He begins to knead the next lump, sticking his tongue out like it helps. You offer no comment. He'll learn. Outside, the town stirs. Market stalls clatter to life. Children run past, chasing each other with wooden swords. You can hear the blacksmith cursing at his forge again, a comforting sound. The scent of baking bread drifts out through the shutters, rich, toasty, comforting. A few early customers wander in. A nun, a soldier, a very confused goose, again. You slice off warm ends, wrap them in cloth, accept payment in coin, eggs, or favours. A broken fence mended, a patch of roof repaired. It's the barter economy, and you're well fed. You remember last winter when the snow came early and no flour arrived for weeks. You rationed your loaves, shared with the orphanage. The mayor didn't say thank you, but the children did. They sang you a very chaotic song about cinnamon rolls. You glance at the oven, time to rotate the loaves. You pull them out, golden, crackling, steaming. You tap one, and it sings. That hollow knock that says, yes, this is food, real food. You set them out on the counter, brushing off excess flour and shooing a curious cat. You save the first loaf for the old couple down the lane. You can't chew much, so you make it extra soft. She brings you dried apples in return. Afternoon brings more baking, tarts, buns, small round loaves with herbs. A local lord steward places a large order. You nod politely, but inside you're already calculating how much flour he owes you from last time. Evening settles. You sweep the floor, wipe the counters, feed the starter one last scoop of flour and whisper, "Good job, you weird little blob." It burbles in agreement. You sit by the fading oven, sipping broth and munching the crusty end of a loaf. Outside, the air cools. Laughter rises from the tavern. The sky turns plum dark. And you smile, soot on your cheek, flour in your hair. Because in medieval Europe, the king may feast, but the baker keeps the kingdom alive, one loaf at a time. The low murmur of voices grows louder as you approach the town gate. Not angry, not panicked, just curious, excited even. Someone set up a crude stage near the square. A boy plays a flute with more enthusiasm than talent. A woman in bells twirls through the dirt. A strong man flexes next to a barrel, and in the centre of it all, wearing patched trousers and a wide grin, stands you, because today you're a travelling performer, a juggler, a tumbler, a master of fire-breathing and fibbing, a one-person theatre troupe with nothing but a bag of tricks and a talent for making people forget, just for a while, that life in medieval Europe is mostly sawbacks and tax collectors. You set down your sack, 3 juggling pins, carved wood, a flask of oil, a dented tambourine, and 2 sock puppets you swear have better comedic timing than the town priest. You take a swig of water, stretch, and step into character. "Good people," you shout, arms wide. "Have you ever seen a man juggle fire while singing about goat theft?" They laugh. You haven't even done anything yet. That's half the work. Your first trick is simple. Balls in the air, 3, then 4. You add a spin, a bow, a fart joke for good measure. The kids are hooked. A coin lands at your feet. Success. You follow with cartwheels, a limerick about a noble who married a duck. Not real. Probably. And a puppet show where a cabbage solves a murder. Yes, a cabbage. You make it work. Historians still argue whether medieval performers were mere entertainment or informal educators. After all, not everyone can read, but everyone can laugh, or listen, or whisper your stories around the fire later, wondering if there's more truth in them than you'd admit. You've played villages, towns, castles, even one very awkward monastery where you had to change the ending of your nun and a squirrel tale. You adapt. That's your gift. A nobleman in the audience tries to heckle you, something about your shoes. You turn the insult into a song on the spot. The crowd erupts. The nobleman chuckles too, though his servant doesn't look pleased. You've danced on thinner ice. Your show goes on. Balancing acts, a pretend sword fight with a mop, and your signature move, spitting a line of flame after drinking from a magic flask. You feel the heat singe your eyebrows, but smile through it. Every good performer leaves a little skin behind. You pass the hat, literally. Coins clink, a couple of pears, a very fluffy chicken feather. Not bad. You pack up while the sun dips low. A boy tugs your sleeve, asks how you learned to juggle fire. You tell him, by dropping it a lot. He nods solemnly. Tonight you'll sleep in the hayloft of a friendly baker. Last night it was under a cart. Tomorrow who knows? The road is long, the inns are unreliable, and the fleas relentless, but it's worth it. You trade stories with the locals, hear gossip before the priests, know which baron's mistress just fled the castle disguised as a monk. Information is currency, and your coin purse is full. In your quiet moments, you scribble new rhymes, design new gags, a joke about peasants and politicians, a sketch involving a possessed cowbell. You're always creating, always adapting. Because performance is survival, and in a world of labour and plague, your work may seem frivolous, but when you make someone forget their hunger, their grief, their aching hands for 5 whole minutes, you've done more than perform. you've given them peace. Because in medieval Europe, laughter isn't just a luxury, it's a kind of rebellion. You sit cross-legged in the shade, needle in hand, squinting at the sunlight bouncing off silver thread. A tapestry stretches before you like a colourful beast, full of knights, saints, dragons, and absolutely zero realistic facial expressions. Because today you're an embroiderer, not just a stitcher of hems or a fixer of torn cloaks. You create stories that hang on walls, wrap around nobles, and sometimes get paraded through the streets like sacred relics. Your fingers are stained, your back aches, and your eyesight is questionable at best. But the work? The work is magnificent. You lean in, guiding the thread through tightly woven linen. This particular piece is destined for a local church, an altar cloth depicting the martyrdom of St. Crispin, complete with decorative border and, oddly, ducks. You're not sure who added the ducks, but you're going with it. Historians still argue whether embroidery in the Middle Ages was considered art or just fancy needlework. You don't argue, you simply create. Your world is made of loops, knots, and stitches so small they might as well be prayers. Sometimes they are. You're part of a guild, technically. But really, you're one of a handful of women and a few men who understand the true pain of gold thread. It shreds your fingertips. Your calluses have calluses. You wrap your fingers in cloth and keep going. Your apprentice helps with the simple bits, background fill, repetitive patterns, the clouds that float lazily behind every haloed saint. She's learning, slow and steady. You've made her rip out entire rows for crooked tension, and she's still speaking to you. Progress. You remember the first time you stitched a face that looked vaguely human. It was a miracle. Before that, your saints resembled startled sheep. You still think of them fondly. The thread whispers through fabric, creating vines around a central figure, St. Crispin's foot to be exact. Toes are hard. You've given him sandals, historically inaccurate perhaps, but merciful. A monk stops by, inspects your progress. He says nothing, just nods and hands you a bag of dyed silk threads, gifts from a merchant who apparently survived a shipwreck and attributed it to the intercession of a particularly well-embroidered saint. You smile, already imagining the deep blues and burnished reds. Silk is like liquid light when stitched correctly, and terrible when it knots, which it always does. You stretch your back, sip watered wine, and inspect the border. You've hidden tiny patterns in it. Roses, stars, a pair of clasped hands, and once, a snail jousting a frog. No one noticed, or if they did, they were too polite to say. Your fingers fly faster now. You lose yourself in the rhythm. In, pull, loop, in, pull, loop. The world narrows to a single thread of thought, a quiet heartbeat stitched in colour. Evening nears. Candles flicker on wooden stands, their light barely enough for the finer work. You place your embroidery frame aside, wrap the threads carefully, and flex your stiff hands. You visit the chapel where your last piece hangs, 12 angels in a golden sky. You still think angel number 4 looks slightly drunk, but no one else seems to notice. You sit quietly for a moment, not praying, just watching your work catch the candlelight, because in medieval Europe some stories are told in ink and others are stitched gently into eternity. You wake with a grunt and immediately regret it. Your arms ache, your shoulders creak, your fingers feel like someone used them to sharpen knives, which honestly isn't far from the truth, because you are a swordsmith, not a blacksmith. Though the untrained eye wouldn't know the difference. Blacksmiths make nails, horseshoes, hinges. You make legends, blades that sing when drawn and stop singing only when they bite. Your forge is tucked behind a stone wall, downwind from the tanner and mercifully far from the fishmonger. You open the shutters and light the coals, pumping the bellows until the heat roars like a waking beast. Sparks leap skyward. The day begins. Today you're finishing a longsword for a local knight. He's picky, wants his family crest etched along the fuller, also wants it to be balanced, which he defines as not too heavy, but still able to cleave a man clean in two. Sure, no pressure. You start with the steel billet, heating it until it glows orange and softens like dough. You draw it out in long, patient strokes, hammering the shape into existence. The sound echoes through the village, metal on metal, a rhythm as old as war itself. Historians still argue whether medieval swords were more ceremonial than practical. You roll your eyes at that. Anyone who's ever held one knows the answer. A sword is a tool, a weapon, a symbol, sometimes all three. You dip the red-hot blade into water. Steam screams up. Quenching, they call it. Also, a great way to ruin your eyebrows. You check the temper, tap the edge, good resonance, no cracks, you breathe easier. The hilt comes next. Iron tang, wooden grips, wrapped tight in leather. You file the guard, polish the pommel, test the weight in your hand. It's got to feel like part of the arm, not an afterthought. You once saw a noble try to duel with a blade so top-heavy, he nearly took out his own foot. Your apprentice fumbles a handful of rivets. You don't shout. Much. He's learning. You give him a broken dagger to reforge. If he manages not to bend it into a pretzel, you'll promote him to handle polishing. Maybe. Around midday, a travelling merchant stops by, asking if you've got anything exotic. You show him a curved falchion with etched vines and a handle made from deer antler. He offers 4 silver coins and a smile. You counter with 8 coins and a smirk. He buys it. You eat bread by the forge, chewing while sharpening. The blade sings against the whetstone a high, clean note. You test it on straw, then leather, then a side of pork, courtesy of the tanner who owes you for a cleaver. Clean cut. Satisfying. You remember the finest sword you ever made. Not for a knight, not for a lord. For a woman who never gave her name. Paid in gold, asked no questions, vanished the next day. The blade was dark, light as bone, etched with wolves. You think of it sometimes, when the moon is full. You finish the knight's sword just as dusk paints the forge in gold. You wipe it clean, wrap it in cloth and slide it into its sheath. It gleams faintly, heavy with promise. You lean against the doorway, watching the street. Children run past with sticks pretending to duel. You smile, remembering when you were one of them. Because in medieval Europe some write history with ink, but others write it in steel. You shuffle into your cramped little shop, light the lantern with a flick of flint, and inhale deeply. That's the smell, wax, tallow, soot, and the faintest whiff of old cabbage from your neighbour's window, but mostly wax, always wax. Because today you're a chandler, a professional candle maker, the medieval bringer of light, and possibly the reason the abbey didn't burn down last winter, thank you very much. You roll up your sleeves, already sticky from yesterday, and examine your tools, ladles, moulds, wooden rods, and the great iron pot that bubbles in the centre of your workspace. The fire beneath it cracks to life, and the tallow melts down into a thick shimmering soup. It smells memorable. You begin the day with tallow candles, cheap, effective, and wildly unpleasant to make. Tallow, if you don't know, is rendered animal fat. You get it from the butcher, who always grins far too much when handing it over. It's soft, greasy, and has the aroma of a goat who's just run a marathon. You dip each wick, one by one, into the molten tallow, then hang it to cool. Dip, hang, dip again. Over and over until the layers build up. It's meditative work, like making extremely flammable onions. Historians still argue whether medieval chandlers were respected tradesmen, or just tolerated because nobody wanted to grope around in the dark. You believe it's a bit of both. Your candles light homes, churches, inns, and, on more than one occasion, very awkward romantic encounters behind the tavern. You also make beeswax candles when you can get the stuff. They burn cleaner, smell better, and cost enough to make your eyebrows lift involuntarily. Only the church or nobility can usually afford them. Still, you keep a few tucked away, small ones, for special orders and curious nobles trying to impress guests. Your apprentice knocks over a cooling rack. You sigh. He's a sweet boy but distractible, constantly carving little faces into the ends of candles. Last week a monk bought one with an unfortunate expression, and didn't notice until Vespers. You sort the wicks, short for votives, long for lanterns, braided extra thick for weather candles. You even experiment now and then. Once, you added lavender to the wax. It sold instantly. Then the church banned it for being distracting. You still make a few in secret. You call them prayer enhancers. A noblewoman stops by in the afternoon. She wants candles shaped like swans. You nod solemnly. You can absolutely do that. You cannot. But you'll figure it out. You work well into the evening. Your hands smell permanently of smoke and sheep. Your tunic is dotted with hardened wax like accidental armour. You have burns on your arms that resemble constellations, the pot bubbles, The candles drip. The shop flickers golden with a dozen tiny flames from finished products lining your windowsill. You eat supper standing, a bit of cheese and a heel of bread. You chew slowly, watching the candles harden into smooth towers of light. It's satisfying, beautiful even. You think of all the dark corners these candles will chase away tonight. The child's room, the monk's study, the cellar stairs. You refill the pot one last time. The tallow sloshes, and you stir it gently, whispering to yourself, not spells, but habits. Not too hot, not too cold, steady hand, even dip. You lay your tools to rest, wipe your hands on a cloth so stained it tells its own story, and close the door behind you. Because in medieval Europe you may not be a warrior, a healer, or a king, but you're the one who keeps the dark at bay. You whistle softly as you walk the uneven path out of town, pack slung over one shoulder, a small wooden cage swinging at your side. The sun's just rising, and the trees ahead shimmer with dew. Somewhere out there, between the streams, under the brush, maybe hiding in the folds of a tree trunk, is your quarry, because today you're a medieval falconer. Yes, one of those people. You work with birds that stare directly into your soul and judge your worth before breakfast. And most days, you pass the test. Barely. You reach a quiet meadow and set down your gear. Gloves, hoods, thin leather straps called jesses, and a small pouch of raw meat that smells like regret. Your falcon, a sleek brown female with piercing eyes and a beak like divine punishment, shifts restlessly on her perch. Her name is Marjorie. You tried naming her something majestic once, like Storm Shadow, but she bit you. So Marjorie it is. You slip on the glove and coax her onto your arm. She hops up lightly, claws pricking through the thick leather. You check her feathers, inspect her talons, murmur soft nonsense. Falconry is part science, part poetry, and part sheer luck. Historians still argue whether falconers were skilled servants or noble status symbols. The answer, you've learned, depends on your employer. You've worked for both counts and carpenters, and the bird never seems to care. All she wants is to fly, kill something small, and be mildly disappointed in you afterward. You set her hood aside, raise your arm, and let go. She vanishes into the sky like an arrow dipped in sunlight. You breathe out. Falconry is one of the oldest hunting arts, and your job isn't to dominate the bird, it's to partner with it. You spot a rustle in the grass, a hare, a pheasant. You give a sharp whistle. Marjorie dives, a blur of wings, a thump, then silence. Success. You run over, retrieve the prize, and offer her a treat. She stares like you've insulted her family. Eventually she accepts, tearing into the meat with regal disdain. You smile. She's in a good mood today. That's rare. The woods echo with life. You see deer tracks, hear a woodpecker, dodge a boar snuffling in the undergrowth. You and Marjorie move together, quiet, alert, fluid. She circles above, occasionally returning to your glove with a flourish that says, "You die without me." She's not wrong. By midday you've bagged 2 rabbits and a partridge. Enough for your employer's table and a few coins for your pouch. You sit beneath an oak, offering Marjorie a bit of liver while you chew dry bread and sip weak ale. You both eat in silence, dignified. You remember your first bird. A kestrel with a bad attitude and a fondness for flying away at key moments. You spent half your apprenticeship in trees. You fell out of 3, one time into a moat. You've improved. You train birds for others too, nobles who want the prestige but not the work. You hand them a hooded falcon and watch their faces light up, right before the bird relieves itself on their silk doublet. You also work with sparrowhawks and goshawks, each with its own temperament. Sparrowhawks are jittery, always half a second from panic. Goshawks are aggressive. You still have a scar from one that decided your earlobe was a snack. Afternoon drifts into evening. You return to town, bird on your arm, feathers ruffled but spirits high. People nod respectfully. Falconry carries weight. Not just because it's beautiful, but because it whispers of mastery over nature. You clean Marjorie's talons, feed her again, and return her to her perch. She watches you like she's deciding whether to tolerate you again tomorrow. You nod. Because in medieval Europe some hunt with dogs, but you hunt with sky. You hum softly as you pull open the worn wooden shutters, letting the morning light spill across shelves of clay. The smell of earth, wet, raw, and familiar, rises to greet you. A half-formed jug sits on the wheel, still slightly damp. You pat it gently, like a sleeping pet. Because today, you're a potter. Not just any potter. The potter. The one who makes everything from ale jugs to chamber pots to communion chalices. Your hands have shaped more of this village than the mayor's taxes, and they've certainly done it more gently. You stoke the fire beneath your kiln, which still smokes slightly from last night's firing. It's a temperamental beast. Likes even heat, hates surprises. You whisper to it sometimes. It hasn't exploded in months. Progress. You knead the clay before starting, a sticky, heavy process that feels oddly satisfying. You push out air bubbles, test the consistency, add a splash of water when it gets stubborn. This clay came from the riverbank 2 miles south. Rich, fine, slightly gritty. You know its temperament better than some people's. Historians still argue whether medieval potters were artisans or mere labourers. You'd argue they were magicians. You take earth and turn it into cups, into bowls that carry soup, into amphorae that store oil and survive wars, plagues, marriages. You centre a lump of clay on the wheel, wet your hands and begin. The spin begins slow. You press inward, upward, shaping a cylinder that narrows into a neck, flares into a mouth. Your hands glide like dancers, fingers steady, palms guiding. The jug grows from your touch. You steady a wobble. You smooth a bulge. You feel time melt. Outside you can hear the town waking, clatter of hooves, distant shouts, a dog barking like it's solving a mystery. In here it's quiet. Just you, the wheel, and the rhythm of creation. Your apprentice enters quietly, carrying a tray of dried pieces. Plates, cups, a small statue of St. Hubert that looks suspiciously like your neighbour. You nod approval. She's learning. Last month her cups looked like melted hats. Today they're nearly symmetrical. You trim yesterday's batch, scraping off excess clay, carving soft grooves for decoration. Some are commissioned, marked with a family crest or a merchant's sigil. Others are for the market stall. Plain, sturdy, dependable. Like bread, but breakable. You take a break to drink ale from one of your own mugs. It fits your hand perfectly. You smile. It should. It's the 7th time you've remade the design. You drop it on purpose once a year to make sure it still bounces off wood floors. Usually. The kiln's ready. You load it carefully, piece by piece, stacking with the precision of a nervous bricklayer. Too tight and they'll crack. Too loose and they'll warp. You whisper again. No one taught you that. It just helps. You seal the kiln and feed it more wood. The flames dance. You watch through the vent as your creations turn orange, then red, then ghostly white. You think about last year's festival, when the Lord's daughter chose your goblet for the blessing. Or that old farmer who brought you a shattered pitcher and left with a new one, engraved with his wife's name who'd passed the week before. You don't just make pots, you make memories. Moments, mundane tools that hold the sacred. Bread, wine, tears, joy. Evening falls. The kiln cools. You peel clay from your arms and wipe your brow with a cloth permanently stained a shade of muddy despair. You cover the wheel, stack the drying racks. Look once more at your shelves, each one lined with shapes that once lived only in your hands. Because in medieval Europe, empires may crumble, but pottery endures. The crisp morning air carries a familiar tang, something between hot iron and cooked leather. You sniff once, twice, then nod. That's the smell of a good day's work waiting. You tie on your apron, roll up your sleeves and check the coals in the forge. Because today you're the village blacksmith, and not just the one who makes horseshoes. You are the spine of the town, the maker of hinges, the binder of ploughs, the one people come to when their world needs mending in iron. Your forge is alive already, the embers glowing like a dragon's eye. You pump the bellows until the coals hiss and spark, then shove in the first iron bar of the day. You sip your watered ale and glance at your list. 2 horseshoes, 1 broken hoe blade, a latch for the baker's door, and a suspiciously vague request for an iron item that could be used as a persuasive object. You'll start with the hoe. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths were common craftsmen or vital engineers of daily survival. All you know is that if you stopped working for 2 days, the entire village would devolve into shouting, snapping hinges and poorly secured poultry. Your hammer rests comfortably in your grip, heavy and worn smooth. You pull the red-hot metal from the fire and begin to shape it, sparks leaping around your boots. There's a rhythm to it. Tap, strike, flip, strike. Music, but louder, and much, much sweatier. A farmer arrives, holding the remains of a ploughshare that looks like it lost a duel with a rock. He drops it on your workbench with a sigh. You don't speak, you just hold out your hand for the coin. He coughs, offers half. You stare. He pays the full amount. You reheat the ploughshare, flatten and reinforce it, and even add a small flourish near the base. Nothing fancy, just enough for pride. When he picks it up later, he'll grunt something like, "Huh? Nice," which is high praise. Your apprentice returns from fetching coal, face smudged, tunic untucked, somehow already missing a glove. You assign him to bellows duty. He's strong, and the bellows are cranky, so they're well matched. A woman from the manor stops by with a broken gate hinge. You take one look and decide to make a new one from scratch. You craft it from bar stock, shape the loops, twist in a bit of flair because she'll notice, and quench it with a satisfying hiss. You eat lunch standing, bread, cheese, and a piece of apple you think fell in the coal bin but tastes fine. You lean against the wall, admiring the glowing forge. It's your hearth, your heart, your dragon. You turn to shoeing a horse next. The beast glares at you, you glare back. Air. Eventually it blinks. Victory. You file its hooves, heat and shape the shoe, nail it in place. Not one kick. A miracle. Mid-afternoon brings a young nobleman, likely his first time in a forge, judging by how he winces at every spark. He asks for a custom dagger. You listen, nod, and offer a price that makes his eyebrows rise. He pays it anyway. You file that expression away for later use. You'll start that dagger tonight, after the other jobs are done. You're thinking a sleek curve to the blade, inlaid copper along the hilt, and maybe your mark hidden beneath the guard. Not for vanity, for legacy. As the sun dips low, you dunk your tools in the barrel, watch steam rise like fog and strip off your apron. Your arms throb pleasantly. Your shoulders ache like old friends. You smell like fire and effort. You clean the forge slowly, methodically. Brush the ash, sort the scrap. You whisper thanks to the coals. They answer in silence and warmth. Because in medieval Europe, the blacksmith isn't just the town's fixer. You're the one who turns heat and hammer into hope. You wake with the faint chime of bells and the soft knock of a wooden staff outside your door. Another day, another journey. You pack light. Just a satchel with bread, a flask and a small ledger bound in leather. You tie on your cloak, adjust the cross on your chest, and step out into the chill air. Because today, you're a medieval pilgrim guide. Not a priest, not a monk. Just a well-travelled, slightly dusty soul who knows every twist of the road to Canterbury, every crooked shrine between here and Compostela, and every tavern that waters down its ale. You greet the gathered group, 11 strangers with blisters waiting to happen, a baker's widow, 2 squires trying to out-pious each other, a carpenter with something to prove, and one man who refuses to say why he's here, but clutches his satchel like it contains either a saint's finger or a very nervous frog. You raise your staff and begin. Your pace is steady, your words are kind. You point out the safest crossings, the shady groves, the spots where bandits once struck, and where they're likely still thinking about it. Pilgrimage is a strange kind of travel. It's spiritual, yes, but also blisteringly physical. You know the rhythm of walking prayer, heel, toe, breath, step. And you know the rhythm of sore legs, of poor weather, of makeshift shelter and endless repetition. Historians still argue whether pilgrim guides were spiritual mentors or glorified tour operators. You like to think you're both. You tell stories along the road, not just of saints and miracles, but of ordinary pilgrims who trudged for days just to touch a relic, to whisper a prayer, to feel something holy. You stop at a tiny chapel in the woods. The group kneels. You stand back, letting the silence wrap around them like mist. Then you distribute food, bread, dried figs, a bit of goat cheese. The quietest woman in the group breaks into tears. You say nothing. Just sit beside her until she's ready to walk again. You know every inn on this path, every host who will overcharge, every well that runs sweet, every field where sleeping is safe enough. You've seen snowfall in April. You've seen men walk barefoot across gravel weeping. And you've seen joy, sudden, strange joy, in the face of someone who just touched a weathered stone said to have once cradled the foot of a saint. You carry no relics yourself, but you carry stories. Of the blind woman who found her sight in a roadside shrine. Of the boy who returned home from Rome with nothing but a pebble and a smile. Of the man who didn't believe in miracles until his boots stopped blistering. By evening, your group is tired. They collapse into sleep on straw mats. You stay awake a little longer, repairing a sandal, writing a note in your ledger. Third squire snores. Consider earplugs. You sit by the embers, watching the stars blink into the velvet sky. You sip the last of your water. The fire crackles. Someone murmurs in their sleep. Tomorrow more walking, more stories, more prayer, more blisters. But tonight, peace. Because in medieval Europe, roads don't just lead to holy places, they lead to transformation. And now, the fire is low. The pilgrims sleep, the forge is cold, the garden is still. One by one, the jobs of medieval life have dimmed into memory, quiet, well-worn, and full of hands that worked long before yours ever did. You've walked in many shoes tonight, some cracked leather, some soft cloth, some barefoot across stone. You've bent over fields, over clay, over parchment and prayer and flame. You've served bread, wielded steel, stitched saints, lit candles. You've listened to bees, trained hawks, carved peace into the grain of a wooden bowl. You did not survive every job, maybe, but you lived it. And now, in the hush between past and dream, you can feel the weight lift. The tools set down. The fire flicker once and rest. The people you met, Marjorie the Falcon, Brother Ulrich the stomping monk, Gertrude and her oatcakes, they're still there, tucked behind your eyelids, ready to wait for another night's journey. So breathe out slowly. Feel the straw pillow beneath your cheek, or maybe it's the soft weight of a woolen cloak, or a bench near a window where a candle flickers, just barely. Let your breath lengthen. Let the day fall away. The roads are walked, the swords are quenched. The bread is baked, the birds are sleeping, and so are you. Good night, fellow traveller. 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 Good night, fellow traveller.